They mocked the worn backpack like it held nothing but shame. Inside was a trophy that would silence them all. Sometimes the smallest bag carries the biggest dreams, and sometimes those dreams change everything. The hallways of Jefferson High buzzed with the usual morning chaos, but Marcus Williams moved through it like a ghost carrying secrets. His small, frayed backpack, the same one he'd carried since 8th grade, drew snickers from clusters of students who measured worth by brand names and pristine leather. "What's in there, Marcus? Your lunch and a coloring book?" The words sliced through the air from Tyler Bennett, whose designer bag probably cost more than Marcus's family spent on groceries in a month. Even Mrs. Rodriguez, the math teacher, allowed herself a patronizing smile as she passed, as if the son of a night shift janitor couldn't possibly carry anything of value in that pathetic excuse for school supplies. Marcus had learned long ago that responding only made things worse. The weight in his backpack pressed against his spine, not heavy but significant in ways they couldn't imagine. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that peculiar greenish tint that made everyone look slightly sick. The smell of industrial disinfectant, mixed with teenage body spray and yesterday's cafeteria pizza, created an atmosphere thick with mundane cruelty. But today was different. Today, Mr. Harper would be visiting. Richard Harper, chairman of the school board, moved through the corridors like he owned them, which, in many ways, he did. His tailored suit whispered of board meetings and charity galas, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the humid Atlanta morning. Students straightened their shoulders when he passed, teachers smoothed their clothes and checked their lesson plans. He was the kind of man who commanded attention without asking for it, who could change lives with a signature or destroy them with indifference. He barely glanced at Marcus. The morning dragged on with its familiar rhythm of humiliation. In chemistry class, when Marcus reached into his backpack for his notebook, Sarah Chen whispered loudly enough for half the room to hear, "I'm surprised that thing doesn't fall apart when you touch it." The laughter that followed felt like needles under his skin. Marcus kept his eyes down, but his fingers found the edge of something else in his bag. Smooth glass, cool to the touch, with engraved letters his fingertips had memorized. By lunch, the mockery had reached a crescendo. Marcus sat alone at his usual corner table, trying to ignore the phone cameras pointed in his direction as students documented his isolation for their social media stories. He pulled out his worn folder to review his notes, the same folder that had carried him through 3 years of advanced science courses that no one knew he was taking. The scent of industrial cheese and reheated vegetables filled the cafeteria, mixing with the sharp smell of disinfectant and adolescent anxiety. That's when Mr. Harper walked through. Harper had been having a difficult morning. The quarterly budget meeting had run long, his assistant had double-booked his afternoon, and he still had to prepare remarks for tonight's fundraising dinner. School visits were a necessary evil, a chance to be seen caring about education while mentally calculating tax deductions and political favors. He moved through the cafeteria with practiced efficiency, nodding at teachers, patting a few shoulders, his mind already on his next appointment. But something made him stop. Marcus had opened his folder, and there it was, a letterhead Harper recognized immediately. The logo of the National Youth Science Foundation, the same organization his brother David had helped establish before the car accident 15 years ago. The same foundation that had consumed David's evenings and weekends, his passion project for finding young scientific talent in unexpected places. Harper's chest tightened. He moved closer, pretending to examine the lunch menu board while stealing glances at Marcus's paperwork. Official correspondence, congratulatory language. Technical diagrams that looked far more sophisticated than anything he'd expect from a kid whose classmates were currently filming his lunch for their entertainment. The afternoon brought an emergency assembly. Principal Watson's voice crackled through the aging sound system, calling all students and faculty to the auditorium. Harper stood at the side of the stage, his expression unreadable as the teenager he'd dismissed that morning was called forward. Marcus walked slowly, his small backpack looking even more pathetic under the harsh stage lights. Whispers rippled through the crowd, more jokes, more speculation about why the scholarship kid was being singled out. Then Mr. Hansen, the science department head, reached into Marcus's backpack. The silence was immediate and complete. The trophy emerged like something from another world, heavy crystal and brushed metal, catching the light and throwing it back in brilliant fragments. The engraving was visible even from the back rows. National Youth Science Foundation, First place engineering innovation, Marcus Williams, water purification systems for underserved communities. The quiet stretched until it became uncomfortable. Someone coughed, a chair creaked. Then the whispers started again, but different now, confused, embarrassed, amazed. Harper felt something cold settle in his stomach. His brother's foundation. His brother's dream of finding brilliant minds hiding in plain sight. And he'd walked past this boy a dozen times, seeing only worn clothes and a beaten-up backpack, missing the genius carrying solutions to problems that plagued millions. After the assembly, Harper found Marcus alone in the science lab, carefully placing the trophy back in his backpack with the tenderness of someone handling a newborn. The boy looked up with eyes that held no accusation, only quiet dignity. "Tell me about your project," Harper said, his voice rougher than he'd intended. Marcus's voice was soft but steady. "Water purification using solar distillation and biochar filtration. It's designed for communities without reliable electricity or clean water access." He paused, then added, "My mom used to work nights at the hospital before she started cleaning offices. She'd come home talking about kids getting sick from bad water. I wanted to help." The simplicity of it, the pure motivation, hit Harper like a physical blow. "How long have you been working on this?" 3 years. I built the prototype in our garage." Marcus zipped his backpack carefully. "My mom said if I was going to dream, I should dream big enough to help other people." Harper stared at this boy who'd been invisible to him for months, carrying world-changing innovation in a bag that wouldn't survive another semester. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a janitor's cart squeaked down the hallway. Probably Marcus's father, cleaning up after students who'd never know his son might change their world. "I need to ask you something," Harper said. "Would you be willing to present your project to the school board? We have a meeting next week with representatives from 3 engineering firms." Fear flickered across Marcus's face. What if they ask questions I can't answer? What if they ask questions only you can answer? The presentation was unlike anything the board had ever seen. Marcus stood before a room full of suit-wearing adults, his worn clothes and nervous energy making him look younger than his 16 years. But when he started talking about flow rates and filtration efficiency, when he sketched diagrams on the whiteboard with confidence born from genuine understanding, the room transformed. Questions came rapid fire, technical challenges, cost analysis, scalability concerns. Marcus answered each one with the kind of deep knowledge that comes from years of obsessive learning, from late nights spent researching and building and testing. His voice grew stronger with each response until he was no longer the invisible boy from the hallways, but a young scientist commanding the attention of people who built cities and moved millions of dollars. Dr. Sarah Kim from Meridian Engineering leaned forward. "Marcus, have you considered patent applications? Because what you've described could be worth—" "I don't want to sell it," Marcus interrupted quietly. "I want to give it away, to places that need clean water." The room fell silent again, but this time it was the silence of recognition, the moment when adults realize they're in the presence of something rare and precious. Harper cleared his throat. "The board is prepared to offer Marcus a full scholarship to any engineering program he chooses, plus funding for his project development." He paused, looking directly at the boy who'd been carrying brilliance in a backpack held together with duct tape. "We're also establishing the David Harper Memorial Fund for Young Innovators to ensure we never again overlook talent because of how it's packaged." 3 months later, Marcus's prototype was being tested in rural communities across Alabama, Georgia, and North Carolina. The results were extraordinary. Clean water production rates that exceeded expectations, maintenance requirements simple enough for local communities to handle, costs low enough for widespread implementation. But the real change was at Jefferson High. The hallways looked the same, smelled the same, hummed with the same fluorescent anxiety. But something fundamental had shifted. Teachers looked twice at quiet students. Administrators asked different questions. The Innovators program that Harper had funded became a refuge for kids carrying hidden talents, secret brilliances, dreams that didn't fit the standard molds. Tyler Bennett, who'd mocked Marcus's backpack, found himself struggling through remedial algebra while Marcus was fielding calls from universities. Sarah Chen, who'd laughed at the frayed fabric, watched from the back of the auditorium as Marcus received his acceptance letter to MIT with a full ride and research funding. The morning of graduation, Harper stood in his office looking out at the parking lot where students were gathering for the ceremony. Marcus walked past, still carrying that same small backpack, still moving with quiet dignity. But now other students walked with him, kids who'd learned that brilliance comes in unexpected packages, that worth isn't measured by labels or logos. Harper's assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, the car is ready to take you to the ceremony." He nodded but didn't move immediately. On his desk sat a letter from the First Community to implement Marcus's water purification system. 43 families now had access to clean drinking water. At the bottom, a handwritten note from a little girl. "The water tastes like hope." The ceremony was everything graduations should be. Proud families, emotional speeches, the flutter of caps against the blue sky. When Marcus's name was called, the applause was thunderous. He walked across the stage with the same quiet grace he'd always carried, accepted his diploma, and for just a moment caught Harper's eye in the crowd. They nodded to each other, a simple acknowledgement between two people whose lives had changed the day they learned to see past surfaces. After the crowd dispersed, Harper found himself alone in the empty auditorium. The janitor was already working, sweeping up the debris of celebration. It was Marcus's father, pushing his cart with the same quiet dignity his son carried. Harper had never spoken to him before, had barely noticed him, despite seeing him dozens of times over the years. "Mr. Williams," Harper called out. The older man looked up, surprised. "Yes, sir?" "Your son is remarkable." A smile spread across the janitor's weathered face. "Always has been. Just took the rest of y'all a while to notice." Harper laughed, the sound echoing in the empty space. That it did. That evening, Harper stood in his study, looking at a framed photo of his brother David, brilliant, passionate, gone too soon. Next to it sat something new, Marcus's old backpack, carefully preserved under glass. A plaque beneath it read, "In memory of dreams carried quietly, talents hidden in plain sight, and the courage to look beyond what we think we see." The doorbell rang. Harper's housekeeper announced that Marcus and his parents had arrived for dinner, a monthly tradition they'd established, a chance for the boy to share updates on his projects, and for Harper to remember that brilliance doesn't announce itself with fanfare. Over dinner, Marcus talked about his summer internship, his plans for college, the communities that would soon have access to clean water, because a teenager had refused to let mockery silence his dreams. His parents listened with the quiet pride of people who'd always known their son was special, who'd worked extra shifts and sacrificed comfort so he could chase solutions to problems bigger than himself. After they left, Harper walked to his window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there were other kids carrying world-changing ideas in worn backpacks, walking invisible through hallways full of people who couldn't see past surfaces. Tomorrow, he'd look harder. Tomorrow, he'd remember that genius doesn't always come gift-wrapped. The trophy Marcus had carried that day still sat in his childhood bedroom, catching light from the street lamp outside. But the real prize wasn't crystal and metal. It was the knowledge that sometimes the smallest packages carry the biggest changes, and sometimes all it takes is one person willing to look beyond the surface to change everything. In classrooms across the district, teachers now told the story of the boy with the beaten-up backpack who'd carried a solution to one of the world's oldest problems. They reminded their students that brilliance doesn't require designer labels, that worth isn't measured by what others think, and that the most important discoveries often come from the most unexpected places. Marcus Williams had taught them all a simple truth. Never judge a backpack by its cover, because inside it might be carrying the future.